Welcome to Alimentary, the podcast series where you will learn about your amazing body, how it works, and of course why food is so important, and also pick up some simple recipe and lifestyle tips and tweaks to help you to influence your health in a positive way. Supporting a healthy mindset is really important when it comes to improving or even maintaining our healthy lifestyle habits. Because when we're feeling even a little bit off, we can be too busy in our heads to find time to keep them up. In a previous episode, Brendan Larkin was kind enough to explain therapies like counselling, psychotherapy and hypnotherapy. And in this episode, I am delighted to be joined by another psychotherapist and counsellor and someone I'm very fond of, Penny Sharkey, to learn more about cognitive behavioural therapy, or CBT. Now, there's a clue in the surname. Penny is one of my in-laws, and we were chatting about CBT recently, and so I'm really grateful that she agreed to come on the podcast to share her expertise with you too. Now, Penny is a professional counsellor and psychotherapist and a member of the Irish Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy. She holds a first-class honours degree in Integrative Counselling and Psychotherapy, a degree in Social Studies and a master's certificate in Cognitive Behavioural Therapy. Currently, she works in a private practice in Celbridge and Maynooth in County Kildare. From an early age, Penny developed a curiosity about how the power of human connection and the resilience of the human spirit worked. Now, this passion was sparked by witnessing a friend who struggled with severe anxiety and depression, and from witnessing how effective therapy was in helping them to transform their life. That experience motivated her to help others to navigate their own challenges and find healing. In her practice, Penny strives to create a warm, accepting and honest environment where clients can feel safe to explore their feelings. Her therapeutic approach is flexible and client-centred, emphasising empathy and tailored interventions to meet each person's unique needs. And she said that she finds it to be really fulfilling to work to support those who are seeking help and helping them to find their own strength and clarity in times of distress. So let's get into the episode and learn from Penny Sharkey about cognitive behavioural therapy. So Penny, for our listeners who might not be familiar with CBT, how would you define it in, I guess, sort of simple terms?
So CBT, or cognitive behavioural therapy, it's widely used. It's empirically supported therapeutic approach. And while there are different types of CBT which have been designed to target specific challenges, all CBT-based techniques work on the same theory, that thoughts, feelings, what we do and how our body feels are all connected. So if we change one of these, we can alter the others. So when people feel worried or distressed, we often fall into patterns of thinking and responding which can worsen how we feel. So I guess CBT works to help us in the present moment to notice and change problematic thinking styles or behaviour patterns with strategies to help recognise these unhelpful thinking patterns, which are known as cognitive distortions. So these inaccurate thoughts that reinforce the negative thought patterns or emotions. So I guess these negative thought patterns can play a role in diminishing your motivation or lowering your self-esteem and contributing to problems like anxiety or depression. So it's normal to have these thoughts occasionally, but they can be harmful if they're kind of frequent or extreme, I guess.
Okay, and they, as you say, then they cause you to show up in a different way to challenges that are in your life. You know, you bring your old baggage maybe into these problems. In your experience, what are some of the most common cognitive distortions that people struggle with?
Yeah, so there's many cognitive distortions, and basically these unhelpful thinking patterns will be stuff like, overgeneralization. So overgeneralization happens when you draw like a broad conclusion based on a single event or experience. For example, if you fail one test, in a specific subject, you might think you're terrible at all subjects, even though you've only had difficulty in one area,
Yeah.
or jumping to conclusions. You're jumping to the conclusion when you assume you know what'll happen, or mind reading is another one. Like you think you know what somebody else is thinking, and your
Yeah.
fortune telling involves predicting like a negative outcome or
Yeah.
something will happen in a certain way. So it's kind of like that all or nothing thinking that
Mm.
makes you see things in extremes with no middle ground. So you might think you're either a total success or a total failure without recognizing anything in between. It's very black and white.
Mm.
And there's a lot of kind of should and must statements, kind of, or rigid rules you set for yourself. So yeah, so that would be, your distortions.
Is that like catastrophizing in some instances where you think that the worst thing is going to happen? Is that what you would classify that as?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, that catastrophizing, that kind of thinking. So it's like the basic premises really is that it's not the event that causes us to feel a certain way. It's the way we think about these events that creates the feelings and the behavior. So as you said, that catastrophizing, that black and white, like, that I know that person hates me, or that real kind of negative mindset sometimes we can get into. So in other words, we can create our own distress about situations or life events largely about thinking about them in a self-defeating way. So it's not to blame or put fault on it, but to try and empower. Cognitive behavior therapies try and empower a change.
Yeah, I suppose it's that fight or flight, isn't it? That particularly if we're stressed already, then we're looking for the danger in any given situation. So we kind of look for the worst case scenario, so that we're ready for it, or we think we're ready for it. And as you mentioned there, we can sometimes project. As you said, mind reading. It is very unhelpful and hugely inaccurate when we do that too. When we think we know what's going on in someone else's head.
Yeah, and it can spiral as well, I think,
Mm.
and we kind of look for evidence then, with that kind of thinking, like, I think that person hates me, and oh look, they didn't say
Yeah,
hello to me, so I
yeah,
must be right. So, and I guess that's what CBT is there to do. It's kind of to help you to respond to these unhelpful thoughts and beliefs,
mm,
and to educate you to a different way of thinking about them, and developing practical skills and strategies that you can apply into your daily life to manage it.
Also, so that's like identifying triggers.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really helpful to identify triggers, what triggers you, and like there's CBT offers many different ways to help identify these triggers of the black and white thinking, and or what kind of sets you off, or what triggers you to think a certain way. And it's kind of by, I guess I always say to people, by being more aware
Mm.
of yourself, and kind of slowing things down. As we talked about before, everybody's life is very fast paced at the moment.
Yeah.
So, you know, I guess one of the best methods to spot triggers is to pay close attention to your thoughts, your feelings, and to your emotional reactions. And the self-awareness helps you pinpoint triggers or
Mm.
patterns. And so does, like, journaling is a great technique in CBT for self-discovery, and to help you kind of notice your triggers, or mindfulness, because it kind of slows you down and helps you live more in the present moment and identify triggers.
Yeah. So I think cognitive behavioral therapy is actually really offers you practical tools as well, Penny, doesn't it? So doesn't it involve homework?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there is a lot of homework in CBT, a lot of practical skills. So I guess first, homework would be based around kind of educating yourself. So for me, would be educating my client on what CBT is, and how, the unhelpful thoughts. So homework can look at, it helps you reinforce good behaviors. So the homework it's really helpful to like mood diaries, as we talked about, or, journaling, they're all types of homework. So relaxation techniques, disputing exercises. So homework is really helpful to help us change the behavior. And because you're only really in a session with the therapist for 50 minutes. So you really need to be putting in the effort, I guess, outside therapy
Yeah.
to work on it. And the homework gives you that opportunity to work on it, see what issues you're having, go back to your therapist, discuss it, maybe tweak it if you're finding it's not helpful, if it's not working, and it reinforces the behavior.
Yeah. You mentioned disputing exercises there. So is that where you can maybe prove to yourself that your thinking was inaccurate?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I guess the easiest way maybe to I'll run through an example that might kind of help listeners kind of understand. So
Yeah.
I'll give you an example of like a harmful thought and how we can kind of dispute it or think about it differently. So if, for example, you're walking down the street and you see a friend of yours and you think he ignored me.
Mm.
So your thought is he ignored me. He doesn't like me anymore. And then the feeling you might get is you might feel down, you might feel sad, or you might feel rejected.
Mm.
And then the behavioral consequence is that you maybe start to avoid this person in the future because you've assumed that they don't like you. So I guess you write it down, you look at it logically, you go through it with your therapist, and you kind of can you think about it in a different way? Can we move? So CBT, I guess, requires the person to be flexible and not so rigid in their thinking. So that's what we're trying to change. So another alternative could be that we could try and maybe look at this if we wrote it down and dispute it would be maybe he didn't see me or he
Yeah.
didn't notice me or, maybe he's having a bad day and he's stuck in his own thoughts. And maybe I'll give him a call later. I'll give my friend a call later and see if he's okay. So that would stop the feeling of you feeling down and rejected. You don't have those negative feelings. And then you go about your day and then maybe call your friend later and check in and see if everything is okay.
Yeah.
So it's kind of disputing what you think and not letting it spiral. Because a lot of people, when these thoughts run in their head, they'll say, oh gosh, like I thought this. And then I kept on thinking about it and I couldn't sleep because I was thinking about it. So sometimes even the writing it down helps get it out of your head and stop you thinking about it.
Yeah, especially doing a brain dump before. Obviously, sleep is so hugely important to us, and a lot of people are losing sleep with worry and stress, and so you can see from everything that you're saying what an impact negative thinking or in this negative thinking patterns can have and end up having a negative impact on our physical health as well.
Absolutely. And that's, I guess, sometimes when, I see clients, it might have started off with something small and then it kind of it's like a lot of things, it grows legs and it starts to feed into other areas of their life. And then they find maybe, you know, that after a while they develop anxiety or panic attacks or, the physical might be they've developed migraines or headaches or it kind of starts to infiltrate their life or that kind of negative thinking or
Mm.
depression I guess sometimes can stop you then from doing the things that you love and
Yeah.
you pull away from certain things in your life and it spirals out of control. So if you suffer from depression you might spend much of your time feeling sad and low and demotivated. And when you feel that way, it's difficult to do things that used to give you pleasure. So you
Yeah.
want to avoid then situations with the unintended consequence, like you want to conserve your energy. But unfortunately, the unintended consequence is when you behave this way, you fewer opportunities for good things to happen. So the result is that you stay in the depressed state and you become more depressed.
Yeah, such a good explanation of it. It can drive sort of gut issues as well, which then can further drive the negative thinking, when further drive anxiety. Um, and as you say, it stops people from enjoying their lives at the end of the day. With the homework, Penny, do you find that clients take to it easily? Is it challenging?
Yeah, I guess one thing I would say if you're attending CBT is with homework, it should always be explained to you. So when your expectations should be set out clearly by your therapist of what is needed, what's involved, so you can, agree to it and you're happy with it. Um, homework is important component of CBT, and it's because it really benefits you. And you must be committed and willing to put in the effort. And it's proven, like statistics prove that like homework is really important to CBT to for it to be successful, I guess. And I guess you need to know what you're getting into, because I guess for some people who maybe have more severe forms of depression or anxiety, it mightn't be suitable because they just mightn't be able for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, you really need to know what you're buying into and if it's suitable for you.
Yeah. So I presume then CBT is one of the tools that you might use with a client, that you have several tools or therapies that you can apply, and then you'll judge based on any individual situation if it's one therapy or if it's a mix maybe of therapies.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, as we've seen, there is loads of different therapies out there, and I think um, as there's no need for people to get try and research what they feel will suit them best. I think when you talk to a therapist, they should be able to kind of have a chat with you and then assess what suits you best. That's what I would do. So you'd integrate maybe, various different forms, and CBT might be one of them. As we said, like there's a lot of homework. So, maybe it's suitable for some people, maybe it's not for others.
Mm.
So the homework is important as it basically helps you to practice the skills you learn and then reinforce these skills. So in a real world setting. But yeah, there is various different types of therapy, and it's good, to kind of suit the client's needs to whatever you feel is best, whatever will suit them. And CBT is really, really great for like anxiety and depression and lots of different things. And it has, there's loads of statistics out there around it. There's loads of research out there around it.
Yeah. I would imagine that the homework is actually giving a client tools as well that they can use even after their therapies sessions are over. They're tools that you could use for life afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the idea, I guess, of CBT is that, you learn these tools. And I always say to people, they almost become part of your daily thinking,
Mm.
and you incorporate them into your daily life. And then you use them and you get into, obviously, it helps you get into a habit. And as we know, to form habits, it takes, they say, what is it, 30 days. So, doing the homework helps you use the tools, helps you incorporate them into your daily life, into your daily practice. It helps you be more aware. Like, as I said, the journaling is a great one to kind of reflect on how your day went and what's going on and what you're feeling, what you're thinking. Because I guess a lot of the times we don't check in with ourselves, and we kind of, life is busy and we just keep on going and going and going. And then all of a sudden we might crash and then go, what's happened?
Yeah, and if you get stuck in your head and your own thinking, you're missing so much outside of yourself then too.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
yeah. Do you ever encounter any misconceptions about CBT that you have to clear up?
Yeah, I guess there is many, like there's so much information around CBT.
Mm.
So I guess some of the misconceptions that you might hear about is that the relationship between the therapist and the client is not important. And I think that's really untrue. I think any therapist you'll talk to will tell you that the first and most important thing in therapy is the relationship, because both, like, you need to have a good working relationship. You need to have that trust. Your client needs to feel, relaxed and open. And that's what I always say to people, when they're attending therapy. If you feel it's not working, you don't have that connection, that's okay.
Mm.
It's okay to leave and then, find somebody else, because it is important. So that would be one of the misconceptions, I think, around CBT, that people say that the relationship is not important, or it doesn't deal with emotions. So many people believe that CBT therapists ignore emotions and strictly focus on the thoughts and behaviors of their clients.
Mm.
And I guess while it's true that the interventions in CBT are centered around challenging thoughts and behaviors, the emotions that result from them is an important process. And a good therapist makes connections between this. So yeah, like, I mean, it's like any therapy, I guess. There's lots of misconceptions out there. And I think as everybody has access to social media now, and you probably find the same, Lynn, and TikTok and Instagram, sometimes there can be a lot of misinformation out there
I think
around.
the problem that I find is that people see like a 20-second snippet about something like fasting, for example, and or it might be they see a supplement on, advertised on Instagram. And for some reason, because it's on Instagram, it gets kudos or something. I always say go into it if you have we're lucky we have a really good health food shop in Cavan, for example. That, forget about your socials, go in there and talk to someone, about the best supplement. And then so people get a little snippet of information about, say, for example, with fasting, that the emphasis is on the number of hours that you fast and not what you eat in the 8 hours or the 10 hours that you are eating. So yeah, I think there's a lot of distortion of, even for, experts, snippets from an expert, and the expert obviously knows what they're talking about, but everything's taken out of context, for clicks and all of that. So definitely agree with you there.
Yeah.
We need to come away from our phones and talk to there's so many experts around us in our communities, and in our lives. That we can always find like a local expert who knows our environment, who can empathize, and who certainly can guide us better than social media in these
Yeah.
situations.
I agree. And I think as well, I think people get overwhelmed with the amount of information sometimes on the internet.
Yeah.
Go into these rabbit holes and then they're so confused, or they say to you, "Oh, I've tried it and it didn't work for me."
Mm.
And that's, I think that's the helpful thing about it, as you said, talking to somebody that knows, that can
Mm.
kind of clear the misconceptions, that can guide you through. And everybody's issues are very different. So it's hard to just blanket apply, certain,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. It needs to be individualized.
Yes, absolutely. Definitely needs to be individualized and clear, and work out a plan and know what you're getting into, and make
Mm.
sure that it's okay for you and it suits your life. And,
Mm.
sometimes people are not ready to make changes, or,
Yeah.
it can be a number of different things. So it's,
Mm.
it's very individual, as you say, Lynn. Yeah.
Yeah. That being said, the internet does have its uses, and I presume that I know in-person sessions are probably the ideal, but would it be possible to do CBT over, Zoom or Teams with clients as well, Penny, for people who can't maybe travel?
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. I think it's it's the internet has definitely its
Mm.
advantages. And I would say that there is a lot of studies out there to say you can do CBT courses online, and they can be very effective. And again, I think it's individual, and it depends on what you are looking for and what your needs are.
Yeah.
So it's very helpful in that way. Like I think there's lots of great tools like such as Aware run an online CBT course, and they also have webinars that are very useful and informative. And I think if, anybody that wants to change and help their mental health, I think it's always a very positive thing.
Yeah.
So, and it's affordable as well. Some people can't afford therapy. It can be very expensive, and the HSE has massive waiting lists. So I think as a tool, it can be, very helpful.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
In terms then of using CBT, do you see it being used more often?
It's not that I see it being used more often. I guess there's a lot of information out there on CBT.
Mm,
Because it's so measurable, because you use a lot of tools, it's used by like a lot of healthcare providers because it's measurable, because it can be, it's rolled out in usually in short term, like 6 to 8 sessions.
mhm.
So for that reasons, I think it's probably, you do see it a lot more. I think parts of it are very simplistic. They're very easy to incorporate into your life. So for that reason, I would say, yeah, like I would see it quite a lot, and people would ask for quite a lot, and maybe not realize what exactly it is.
Yeah.
So it's always again sitting down with a person, finding out what their goals are, finding out what their needs are, and then seeing what suits them best. So yeah, it's out there. It's used a lot. It's used a lot with healthcare providers, and I would say it's a great tool.
Mm. You mentioned there's 6 to 8 week, so that's actually something that's in and of itself. I'm sure that's encouraging to people. They can see a sort of a start and an end. That they can really focus on what they're doing because they know it's maybe an 8 week run of sessions. And I presume then at the first session you have a goal, whether it's being able to, go on public transport or whatever that goal is, and that's maybe how you can measure it at the end of the 8 weeks. Is that one maybe specific goal?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I'm saying, 4 to 6, I think like with healthcare providers, like usually they'll say, we'll provide 6 to 8 sessions.
Yeah.
So depending on what goals you have, it's very measurable. And as you say, if you have a particular goal, that's something like you can't get on public transport because anxiety and fear, it's very measurable in that sense because are you able to attain it at the end of it? Have you been able to change the behavior? And if the answer is yes, then you're very able to measure it. So for that point of view, yeah, it's and I guess like different people, they might start off and say, I only want to do 4 sessions because that's all I can afford. So then you try and kind of give them the best that you can give within those 4 sessions.
Mm.
Other people might start off and they might do 4 to 6, and then they'll kind of, push it out to 2 weekly, and then eventually once a month, kind of to check in and make sure that they're kind of it's a check-in for themselves. People find it holds them accountable.
And
Um,
maybe if you focus on sort of one win, then we feel good about the work that you've done, and then you can apply that then to other maybe issues that you have in your life as well.
yeah, absolutely. As we
Okay.
say, like, that the challenging of the negative thoughts, like people might notice, gosh, when I think about it, I'm actually really negative, and can I think about this in a different way? And so it kind of challenges you to be more accountable and to be less rigid, I guess. So you can incorporate it into your daily life. I think everybody can. So yeah, it's really nice like that. And I think if everybody was to be a little bit more thoughtful and look at themselves a little bit more and kind of challenge their own behavior, it'd be a nicer world we all live in, wouldn't it?
Well, it certainly would, because I think when we're present, in those moments when we are present, we definitely show up as the best version of ourselves because we're not bringing any baggage into problems or conversations or whatever, So, and I mean, that's the goal, isn't it? We just all want to be happier, and enjoy our lives while we're on this lovely, lovely planet. Um, so Penny, that's been really informative. That's given, I think, everybody a really good idea of what is involved in CBT sessions. and really the advantages attached to it. From what you've said, I gather that really the best advice for someone considering it is be flexible, be open.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for anybody, what I always hear is they find it daunting when they decide to engage in therapy. And I'd always say it's well done if you're thinking about it, because it's hard and it can be daunting to take the first step.
Mm.
So it's great to, if you are thinking about it, to think about what you want to maybe achieve, or what's going on for you that you're unhappy about. And once you're motivated for change and ready, there's no need to be nervous. Like most therapists will tell you, we've had to sit on the other side as part of our training, so we know what it feels like to
Yeah.
sit in that chair. And get your information from reliable sources. So when you're looking for a therapist, maybe ask your GP.
Yeah.
Or there's the IACP would have a list of accredited counsellors, and get the proper information out there, and don't be afraid to ask lots of questions.
Yeah.
Um, I always say that to clients, don't be ever afraid to ask any question. When you start off, maybe bring a little copy or journal with you that you can really take down notes, and that you have that as a reference point going forward.
Yeah.
That when you forget things, you can look back and go, okay, that the end that makes sense again, or you can kind of go back at it at the end of the day, because sometimes you're getting lots of information. So it can be helpful to just take a few minutes out after therapy and write down what you found good or any questions you might have.
It's a
So
really good idea. And we need to start thinking about maintaining our mental health as that it's as important as looking after our physical health. So yeah, and there should
yeah,
be no stigma or fear around it. It's only positive
yeah.
things come of it.
Exactly. And I think definitely I've seen big changes around that. People are becoming a lot more open. And as you said about the internet, I think that has been a great tool to for people that felt the stigma attached to that can do online therapy.
Mm,
People in remote areas that maybe wouldn't have access to therapy before,
yeah.
because of where they live, or affordability, not having to drive, or even if you're traveling for work and you want to keep engaged in therapy, it's great as well.
Absolutely. So, Penny, would you have an example of obviously an anonymous case study that you could share with us?
Yeah, so I guess I'll do, maybe to give um, people an idea of what way the CBT kind of works in a session. We'll use social anxiety, because it's I guess I would find a lot of clients would present with social anxiety. So let's look at a case study maybe of, obviously this isn't giving away any details of anybody, it's very generic, but we're looking at social anxiety maybe with a male um, in his 30s, working in corporate, maybe sales. So he would come to therapy and maybe say that his fears are around, presenting, and he needs to present for work, but he finds that he just can't do it. So he's not doing it, but it's something that he really needs to be able to do. But he has this fear around being judged negatively in the work situation, and the presentation is particularly triggering for him, and he finds that he's getting anxiety around this and panic attacks, and then he's also basically getting physical pain associated, such as headaches. So his goal in therapy is to be able to present for work. So he needs to be able to deliver this. So firstly, I guess what we do, we educate him around what social anxiety is, so he's a clear indication of what's going on, and then how CBT can help, the model can help him with this, so to understand his thoughts, feelings, and behavior, and how they're all interconnected. So we're aiming to change this negative emotion of anxiety to a lesser one of maybe worry. So we'd introduce skills and techniques to help, say we'll call him Jack, in his daily life, to challenge. He's maybe found, because of the anxiety, he stopped doing things he loves, like maybe playing football, and he's not able to, with new people and that he doesn't feel comfortable talking to them. So we need to try and work on all this and look at his irrational beliefs around public speaking and kind of change them. So what we might do is we might start off with his diary to kind of track all the thoughts he's having. Like I said there, pointed out a couple, and we'll rate how anxiety provoking he finds them. So it might be the presentation might be a 10, and then maybe, talking to somebody in the store might be a 5 or a 6. And we'll start off with the ones on the lower scale to help him kind of to get confidence. And then, like the diary, will help him dispute his thoughts. And then we'll also introduce maybe like breathing and relaxation techniques to help if he's experiences panic attacks or the anxiety, as we were saying, the fight or flight before, Lynn. So the breathing really helps with that to kind of bring that nervousness down. So we'd gradually build his confidence. So it might be, first thing might be asking him to go into a store and ask, stranger, which would be shop assistant, where the milk is. That might be the first thing. And then we might get him to, obviously his end goal is to be able to present. So we might start with him, doing it in front of a mirror, and then like doing it in therapy so he can practice with the therapist, and he can evaluate how he's doing in role play techniques, allowing feedback in a safe environment to help his confidence. And then the breathing would help, obviously, with the anxiety. And he practiced then, maybe build it up in the next couple of weeks to practicing with his partner or, trusted friend. And then little things in work to build his confidence, maybe talking to somebody he doesn't know in work, or, in a meeting, maybe he never speaks. So trying to get him to speak up in a meeting. So all this helps build confidence over time. And then the relaxation techniques help with the anxiety. Meditation helps as well. The journaling helps them to rate and see if it's improving over the week. So something that maybe was an 8 maybe goes down to a 4. And it helps them gain that confidence and helps them manage it. So at the end, the very end, say he does the presentation, and what we often find is still, yeah, I did the presentation. I still found it that I was a little bit worried, but I didn't have a panic attack and I wasn't as anxious. So people sometimes have unrealistic goals that I'll be able to do it and I'll be brilliant and I'll never feel any fear around it. And maybe that will happen and that's great. But the realistic expectation is that, yeah, it was uncomfortable, but I can do it. So I guess that's kind of an example of techniques we'd use and what maybe a client would hope to achieve within, say, 8 sessions.
That's amazing. Also, the rating part of the journaling is really important because often seeing any improvement keeps people motivated. And say at the beginning, you mentioned there, maybe they started off at an 8, their anxiety was at an 8 and then it was down to a 4. In 8 weeks' time, if you're still feeling any anxiety at a 4, you've kind of forgotten it was at an 8.
Yeah.
So that's actually really important. And I would do that with certain symptoms as well, rate them, because then when a client comes back maybe in 4 weeks, like, oh God, yeah, I forgot I had that twitch or I had this or that, So it's really important to keep people motivated to see any progress at all, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's why you were asking, why is homework important? That's why it's important, because unless you're engaging in it really actively, then you're not going to see the results.
I think it's something that we should probably do, check in with ourselves. The way we might go and, have a physical test, there should be some way of checking in with ourselves. How's our mental health? How's our thinking, or what are our thinking patterns like? It's quite interesting when you do stop and take stock of all of that.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people will say, even when they come into therapy, they'll think it's one issue, and then they sit down and they really, talk about it and process it, and then realize, like, there's that eureka moment. It's something completely different than what they thought. And it's just being able, as you say, sometimes to talk to a stranger that's objective, and even, I guess, I would always say, for people who have like a family member that they know maybe is suffering. And one of the most important things, I guess, when you're trying to support somebody is that you listen.
Mm.
Oftentimes we don't listen. We try and give advice or, interject or solve the problem for
Mm.
them. And maybe all that person needs is just somebody to really, really listen to them.
Really good point there, Penny. Thank you so much. That has been brilliant. And yeah, really appreciate your time.
No problem. Thanks, Lynn. Pleasure.
My thanks again to Penny. The store cupboard staple for this episode is a green leafy cruciferous vegetable, and it's kale. Now, there are different types of kale, like ornamental and dinosaur, but the type that we see commonly in Ireland is curly kale. It's dark green and quite peppery, and actually, if you do have a garden where you're growing vegetables, apparently it grows really easily. I haven't got around to it yet myself, but some of these days. Now, it's actually a descendant of the wild cabbage, which is thought to have originated in Asia Minor and was brought to Europe in about 600 BC. It was eaten a lot in ancient Rome and popular throughout the Middle Ages. Now, if you ever see in a recipe or on lists of healthy vegetables, you might see collards. Well, kale is pretty much the same thing, but it has curly edges and it's less tolerant to heat, but it's similar in terms of its nutritional benefits. Now, it's also so it is a highly nutritious vegetable, and it's an excellent source of carotenes, vitamin C and B6 and the mineral manganese. 1 cup of kale actually supplies about 70% of the recommended daily intake for vitamin C. So very good source of vitamin C, also a fibre and minerals like copper, iron and calcium, and other vitamins like vitamin B1, B2 and vitamin E. So members of the cabbage family contain goitrogens. So if you have any thyroid issues, obviously you want to be aware of this. Now, cooking helps to inactivate the goitrogens. So if you do have any thyroid issues, you should avoid over consuming kale or cabbages, and definitely not raw. So always eat them cooked. Kale also contains oxalates, so if you have a history of kidney stones, you should avoid, again, overconsumption of kale and other greens. And again, it would be advised to eat them cooked as opposed to raw. So when you buy your kale, what are you going to do with it? It's actually, by the way, really reasonable as well. Kale is really cheap, and you can do a lot with it, and it's highly nutritious. So I definitely recommend including this. Wash it thoroughly just before you're going to prepare it. If you wash it and leave it in the fridge for a couple of days, it'll go a bit limp, so it's just not as nice. But when you're washing it, because the leaves are so curly, they can hold sand and dirt. So that's why you just want to give it a really good thorough wash. And obviously, if it's not organic, wash it with some baking soda. I have a blog on my website about washing vegetables with baking soda, so I'll put a link to that in the show notes. So you can eat both the stem and the leaves. Now, the stem is quite tough, but if you chop up your kale, and if you massage in some like olive oil and some black pepper and leave it sitting, it kind of tenderizes it a wee bit, but you can chop it up and add it into a salad. You can add it into a NutriBullet. So say you're making up a NutriBullet, put about a good handful of kale so that it's about 1/3 of the contents, and it'll blitz up really well in a NutriBullet. Not so much in a blender, but works really well in a NutriBullet and just adds so much nutritional value to it. I saw a nice recipe where you could chop your kale and braise it with some apple. Now, what braising means is that you saute it. I'd probably add like a little bit of onion to that as well, but saute the onion first, just on a really low heat so that it's just nice and tender, and then add in the kale and some sliced apples, and just let it saute for a few minutes, and then you put the lid on the pan. So a nice skillet is a good job for this, and just let it kind of saute and braise, as I say, in the heat. And then you can serve it with some maybe a drizzle of balsamic vinegar and some chopped walnuts over the top. It'd be just gorgeous. That'd be a really nice side dish. Now, I'll put a link in the show notes to some more recipes for kale, and Hopefully, again, there's some good information there that'll encourage you to add some more whole foods into your shopping trolley this week. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I just wanted to clarify that the podcast is for informational purposes only and does not substitute professional care from a doctor or trained health professional, nor constitute medical advisor services if you're in a position to need either. However, if you found it interesting, you can subscribe to make sure you don't miss future episodes, or sign up for my newsletter on lynsharkeynutrition.ie.